Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues from Bangkok. I think we're ready to start. And of course, a few more colleagues will join in a couple of minutes, but we have a lot planned. So perhaps we can get started, and I will hand over to Sri Ganesh, our digital transformation specialist here at BRH.
Thanks, Louisa. We've been having several sessions. We've had several sessions, and some of you all joined for that in the past several months. All beginning with I think towards the first half of this year, where we did a bit of sense making with a lot of the country offices. We heard then, a couple of months back from two RRs from Sri Lanka and Malaysia, Azusa from Sri Lanka and Ed from Malaysia, around their experiences around their country offices' experiences around AI, shaping the sort of landscape, the ecosystem that these countries are situated in, and how UNDP can play a role. The intention here today is to go a little bit more deeper to the ground, right? Looking at challenges that come from AI deployment in the field, right? And what are sort of the governance challenges? How do we navigate this in actual context on the ground? And we have two different perspectives that we are hoping to share today. One from two colleagues. One is sort of Kasun Amarasinghe, who's the research scientist at the Data Science for Social Good program at Carnegie Mellon University, and Merl Chandana, who's the team lead for the data algorithms and policy practice at LIRNE Asia, a think tank based in Sri Lanka. We've been working with both of them the last year, looking at, learning from some of the lessons that have come from DSSJ's sort of practice in the United States for more than 10 plus years, and also around the world in operationalizing AI in practice in the public sector. With LIRNE Asia, sort of, looking at, how do we adapt that, in developing country context. So there's quite a bit of learning over the sort of last year and even from before that we're hoping that both Kasun and Merl will be able to share in terms of this operationalizing of AI, right? And then we'll hear from our colleagues from the Philippines country office, Lorraine and Jean, talking about their country offices, work around developing solutions with government, and sort of some of the lessons that they are learning from the field. Just sort of the overall intent here, it is to give all of you here a sense of things in practice. What are lessons from the field? And, if you were to sort of think about the conversations that we've been hearing, a lot on AI, right? We have sort of these two sets of conversations that are happening. One is around, how do we use AI for X, Y, and Z, whether it's in, for social protection, whether it's in agriculture, so AI in governance. The other conversation that we're hearing about is about AI governance, right? How do we make sure that AI is not biased, is inclusive, and we minimize the harms of these of the unintended consequences of AI. These two subjects are intricately linked, right? If you're doing an AI solution for X and you do it in a manner to achieve the outcomes that you want, the impact that you want, you've kind of already taken care of some of the things that you would have to worry about when you think about AI governance, right? How do you make sure that you have coverage and being inclusive, that you're not leaving anyone else out? So in a way, these two subjects really should be thought of together, and hopefully we'll get an appreciation for some of these elements through today's conversation. So thank you once again for joining, and Merl and Kasun, over to you for your presentation. Thank you. And you have about 20 minutes, huh? If you can keep it under, please.
Yeah, we'll try our best. Thanks, Ganesh. Let me actually quickly share my screen. Hopefully this time it works. Mm. Okay, cool. As Thanks for Ganesh. So I hope you all can see my screen. I'm Kasun Amarasinghe. My colleague is Merl Chandana. So I'm primarily in Carnegie Mellon, but I also have one foot in LIRNE, and I work closely with Merl and the team over some projects in Sri Lanka as well. Hopefully, we'll get to talk about that in the Q&A session. Um, quick note to the wonderful people that I get to work with at CMU, Alice, Lily, and Raid. We are a smaller team inside CMU, but we do four types of things, and brunt of our work is in long-term collaborations with government agencies and nonprofits around the world, mostly in the US, but we've worked with agencies from South America, Africa, Asia, Australia, like all over the place. And sort of end-to-end operationalization of AI solutions for those agencies that hopefully solves a problem that agency has, and helping them scope out the needs, build the system, deploy that system at the agency, and helping the agency really build capacity to absorb that tool and maintain, and we slowly wean away from that. So that's the brunt of the work, and that's the work that we'll talk about today as well. I'll start with a few examples, and then we'll talk about some lessons that we've learned along the way in doing this type of work, all over the world. Just to give you a quick sense of like what type of AI adoption we're talking about here. We see two main types of AI adoption in government sector. The first type being, especially with the advent of generative AI, using AI as a workplace efficiency or productivity increasing tool. So, for instance, our state, Pennsylvania, the governor and the state government, one of the first AI adoption exercises that they did was to buy 150 ChatGPT licenses and encouraged the state government employees to use that. So that was the AI adoption that they embarked on at first. But that's not the type of AI integration we are thinking about or focusing about in this talk. What we are thinking about AI is as how do we use AI to generate information that assists a better decision in government. So public service delivery, resource allocation, infrastructure management, any sort of decision making. How can we use AI to make better decisions? That's the scope of this talk, and that's what we're talking about here. So we'll start with a couple of quick examples. This project is in the housing space. It's an ongoing effort with the county government in the county that I live in. The city of Pittsburgh is where I live. The Pittsburgh is a part of Allegheny County. That's where CMU is located as well. So Allegheny County government, the Department of Human Services is the agency that is responsible for administering social benefits programs for the county. And one of the benefits programs that they administer is rental assistance. So, as the name suggests, rental assistance helps families who are renting but cannot pay their rent, facing difficulties paying their rent, and facing eviction. And they give financial assistance to this program. However, in our county, there's about 14,000 eviction cases that gets filed every year, but the Department of Human Services, through the rental assistance program, cannot help all 14,000. I don't need to really impress this point upon this audience is that one common problem that we see in all of social benefits programs is we have more people who need help than we can help. So when this happens, the government agency is compelled to choose who to help. And the current implementation of the program, what the agency does is they serve first come, first served. And when we looked at the data, what we saw was people who call first and ask for help are not exactly the people who need help the most. So the current implementation of the program ends up helping people actually leaving the people who need the help the most behind and helping people who may be supported by other means. So if 100 people became homeless after facing eviction, 85% of them didn't even call for help. So the agency wanted to change this. And they came to us with this question. And what we did was to, okay, let's think about how we can use AI to solve this. Is we built an AI system on the administrative data that the county had been already collecting routinely to run operations to predict for every person who's going through eviction, predicting the likelihood of them becoming homeless in the future. And the AI is just learning from the past homelessness interactions, past evictions, past all the benefits data that we can collect about a person and predicting the future outcome, and then using that predicted future outcome to prioritize them for help. Now the county doesn't wait for someone to call them. The county goes to the person who county goes to them and helps them if they have an eviction filing. And what we saw was when we built this system, the AI system is able to identify at-risk individuals like 10 times better than the current practice. And this was a huge bump. And currently what we're doing is we are running a randomized control trial so what we have the current practice in place and the AI assisted practice in place, and we are evaluating whether the benefits that we saw in our lab simulation settings are they being realized in the real world as well. And the short-term results is that in some cases it's even better. So that's one of the projects. This next one is a project in Indonesia. Again, Jakarta, this was a project with the UN Global Pulse back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. The problem here was like there's a lot of traffic incidents that happens in Jakarta. The city wanted to do something and maybe change traffic patterns, do some interventions to solve this problem. One of the biggest problems, not just in Jakarta, in many other cities in the world, is that traffic incidents are always kind of underreported. When there's an incident happens, it's underreported and near misses are never reported. So how do we fix this data problem to even adequately identify the hotspots in the city to go and do something about it? So that's where AI came in here. Traffic cameras are already in place and footage is being recorded. So we just took that footage and did AI analysis, like used AI to analyze that footage to identify unsafe behavior and hotspots of unsafe behavior so that the city can prioritize those junctions or intersections for different traffic patterns, introducing sidewalks, that type of interventions. And again, no new data was necessarily collected. The infrastructure was already there. We just introduced an analytics system on top of the infrastructure that was already there. This was a similar project in El Salvador. One of the bigger problems that they have in the school system over there is the attrition of school registration. So kids just drop out from school year on out. So they wanted to identify students who are at risk of not coming back to school next year and proactively help them identify what's wrong, create programs to support those students, maybe after school programs, maybe counseling, maybe different sort of programs depending on the problem that's going on. But the first piece of the puzzle is to identify the students who are at risk. So again, AI came in, they had a student management system, and we built a system to predict which students were at elevated risk of not coming back to school next year. In the interest of time, I'll skip over these projects. So the previous one was a project in Baltimore where we used drone data and used AI to detect roof damages. This was a project where we used, again, county administrative data to identify people who are likely to need assistance, but are not enrolled in assistance programs to do proactive outreach to them. This is a program where we used AI to identify people who are at risk of developing severe conditions based on chronic disease. This was liver disease, to do preventative treatment. All of these projects were done with real world partners, real data on real problems. So we've done over 100 similar projects in the last decade or so, as Ganesh mentioned. And in the last year or so, in partnership with UNDP, we've been trying to get some projects off the ground in Sri Lanka as well, with Merl's team at LIRNE Asia. I won't go into detail of about those now. Hopefully, we can talk more about those in the Q&A. So, what have we learned in this last 10 years of work? Like, what works, what doesn't, right? The main thing is these AI operationalization work typically goes through three main phases. The first phase is problem framing. That means we are figuring out what problem to solve. How can AI help? Actually, can AI help? Is there a better option? What would we do if we didn't have access to AI? Who would be using the AI system? What would that person be doing? That all of those details there. And then the second phase, once we have all of those figured out, we go through the AI design and development phase, where either you build something from scratch or procure something from a vendor. And then the third phase is deploying that and validating and monitoring that. So any AI operationalization project goes through these three main phases, and each of these phases have multiple different stakeholders who get involved. And all of those stakeholders are necessary in different parts of this project. So for instance, in the first part of the project, the organizational leadership is very important to kind of set the priorities and set goals for the project. You need the end users to determine like the requirements of the AI system, and their buy-in is also important. And you need AI developers, obviously, to build the AI system, and you need like AI governance folks from the agency to make sure that we have the capacity to, the agency has the capacity to absorb the tool and maintain the tool. So it's a collection of a bunch of different stakeholders coming together in these three different phases in different ways. And one critical point I want to make here is when we talk about scaling a lot in AI in government, what we scale is this process, not necessarily the tool. So when we think about scaling, it's natural to think that, especially because of the popularity of generative AI, what we scale is the AI tool itself. That we procure a tool across different agencies, and that's scaling. That's not necessarily what we want to scale. What we want to scale is this larger process of designing something, adopting something, and evaluating something in a use case, and that's what we want to make sure that we replicate. And this process that we've over the years kind of built through experience is largely method capability agnostic, in the sense that AI's capabilities have changed over the last 10 years or so dramatically, right? And it will continue to do so. So the processes that we develop, the larger, the more agnostic to the capabilities it is, the more beneficial it is for us. Because otherwise we'll have to adapt. Yes, of course, we have to adapt the details of it, but the larger process, it as agnostic it can be, the better it is for us. Right. So, and if we were to take away only one point from this talk, I think this is what I would want to communicate: the importance of investing in this initial phase, investing time and resources in this initial phase. Too often we see instances where the government agency gets into a long-term contract with a big-time vendor. It's a 5-year, $500,000 contract, and they've bought the tool, and now they're trying to figure out what to do with it. So I was talking to a few state-level legislators in the US a few weeks ago. One of the cases that came up was like they had got into a contract with Salesforce and with $500,000, and they're not even using that tool. So really thinking through what is the problem that we're trying to tackle? Why does it matter that we solve that problem? Who would benefit from it if we solve that problem? And whether AI can help. If AI can help, who's going to use the AI system? And do we have capacity and maturity in the organization to absorb an AI tool and maintain it? So at a high level, like thinking through those those questions is really, really, really critical before we embark on adopting or procuring an AI system. The next one is AI systems are, I don't think I need to impress again this point on this audience, but AI system procurement is not very dissimilar to procurement of other software products. Other software products, they do have bugs, but it's largely predictable. We can code it up to do what we want it to do. However, AI systems, we end up using AI for problems that are very difficult to solve. Identifying who's going to become homeless in the next year, identifying students who's going to not return to school next year, or identifying individuals who are not registered in benefit programs but actually need the help. So like these are very difficult and rare outcomes that we're trying to identify. So inherently, the AI system that we build will be wrong in some cases, and it's unpredictable, and we cannot predict when it's going to be wrong. So we need to plan for failure. We need to understand that it's non-deterministic, and we need to understand that there is a chance that it might not actually work. There is a chance that it will not be effective. So how do we minimize this risk? The best way to minimize this risk is to think about it in an iterative way. So we typically approach projects in 3 to 6 month cycles. So in those 3 to 6 months, we run a full cycle of those 3 boxes that I was showing you earlier. We do some quick scoping, come up with some metrics, come up with some goals, do a quick system design. We do a quick version of the system development, and we do some sort of evaluation of the system to see whether the direction that we're going in is the correct one with respect to the metrics that we identified. And then we have some learnings and we adapt. So for instance, in the homelessness project that I mentioned, what we started with was a couple of quick conversations with the county agency to understand their needs, figure out like what were the goals were, what were the metrics that we wanted to monitor for. And then we did the data acquisition and did a first pass of the model within 3 months. And then we did a shadow deployment trial at the end of the 3 months to see whether the results that we saw in the lab setting, were we seeing that in the live setting as well. Then when we saw, okay, we were seeing some results in the live setting, but there was a few problems, we went back and fixed it, and we iterated through that process. And we've been working on this project for a couple of years now, and through those cycles. So setting that 3 to 6 month review cycle and that feedback loop is critical to minimize the risk of unsuccessful outcomes in this type of work. So AI systems, even though we tend to evaluate AI systems at the AI level, that is not sufficient. We need to be evaluating and thinking about AI systems at a system level. What do I mean by that? In public sector use cases, it's very rare that we use an AI output or an AI system to do something autonomously. What happens is AI generates an output, a human takes that output and makes a decision. So what we need to evaluate is actually the performance of this combined decision-making system of the AI and the human. A quick example where we had a project with the Chicago Department of Public Health a few years ago. Chicago still has lead problems in their houses. So the public health department wants to minimize little kids' exposure to lead. So they do systematic inspections of houses, but they need to know which houses to prioritize. So we built a model that predicted and recommended houses for inspections, and a call center takes those recommendations and makes the calls to schedule inspections. We had already tuned the AI system to make recommendations equitably across non-Hispanic and Hispanic households. We had been careful of that. However, when we were monitoring the outcomes of the deployed system, we saw that Hispanic households were registering for inspections at a disproportionately low rate than non-Hispanic households. Upon further inspection, what we found was that the call center was only in English. So Hispanic households were not really understanding or reacting to the calls that the government was giving. So the inspection scheduling rate was low. So the agency agreed to add a Spanish line to it. And then we saw the inspection scheduling rates go up for Hispanic households. So if you note something here, to change the performance of the system, we changed nothing. It's the same AI system. The AI system did not change at all. What changed was the downstream actions that were taken from it because we were looking at it at a system level outcome. If we had only monitored AI outcomes, AI predictions, we wouldn't have even noticed that. Right. We'll be very quick with this. It's very rare that we can just take an off-the-shelf tool and make it work in public sector use cases. These tools that large tech companies put out, unfortunately, the public sector is not their primary target. Public sector use cases are not the primary target use cases. So it's very unlikely that we can just take a tool and make it work in a use case that we need. We need some sort of customization. So for instance, the El Salvador education project that I spoke about earlier, we did similar projects in the United States as well. One in Ohio, one in Maryland. In all three projects, the project was very similar. Identifying kids who are in school and at risk of unsuccessful educational outcomes. However, we couldn't just build the model in El Salvador and use it in Maryland or Ohio because the patterns that lead to bad educational outcomes in El Salvador is very different to the patterns that you see in Maryland or Ohio. So deploying a model that learned contextual patterns in a different context wouldn't yield the results that we actually wanted to do. So it's very critical that we all understand that like the power of AI and machine learning is the ability to learn very contextual patterns, localized and contextual patterns from data. So if we do so for it to do that at the best of its ability, we need to help AI to learn the contextual patterns by customizing it to our needs. And sort of the final point that I will touch on is like agencies like ours, like academic labs like ours, and the agencies like the UNDP, the role it can play. So I think what we've seen over the years is the capacity of AI governance in an agency really plays a huge role in the success of an AI project outcome. Shri Ganesh touched on this a little in the introduction, is like you have AI in governance and you have governance of AI. Governance of AI is the process that ensures effective outcomes and safe outcomes and equitable outcomes or fair outcomes, however you want to name it, of an AI operationalization effort. So while it would be like great if we have capacity at government agencies to build AI within themselves, it's a far-fetched goal. And I would even argue that's not the capacity of a government agency either, but we need to be building capacity at government agencies to be able to govern the AI tools that they implement in their systems. So when I say AI governance, I mean a few things. One is the ability to assess problems and needs of AI, scope out solutions for AI, and evaluate the contextual performance and think through the system level metrics for AI systems that they adopt. So this capacity building at these agencies it's not a quick process. It'll take some time. And in the short term, I think agencies like the UNDP, teams like ours at CMU, teams like Asia, what we can do is to help the agencies like offload that, like take on that burden from the government agencies and help them think through these use cases, what problems to solve, what sort of AI systems to procure, what sort of questions to ask from the vendors that are trying to sell them things, and be in their corner helping and guiding them through these acquisition processes. So hopefully that's something that we can actually work together long term as well, because that will play a critical role in AI operationalization, not just in the region but everywhere in the public sector. Some recommendations on reading, further reading here. National Academy of Sciences put out a document around local and state government AI decision making, how to adopt AI. That could resonate more with the government agencies in our side of the world. This is a guide on procurement for public sector AI, and the other two basically toolkits developed by from our team and another team at CMU that we closely work with around early stage deliberations on designing AI systems for solving public policy problems. I will stop here. Hope I was under time. But if you're interested in like talking about like the Sri Lanka work that we've been doing in the past year, like Merl and I will be happy to chat more. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Kasun, for that. I think when we get to sort of question and answers, we should definitely talk about some of the Asian examples as well, and I'll have a few comments then. But in the interest of time, I want to just move to our colleagues from the Philippines country office. Lorraine, over to you, and we'll come back.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So you can hear me, right? So my name is Lorraine Goyena. I'm an enterprise architect from the UNDP Philippines Pintig Lab. So we're a dedicated data digitalization and recently also an AI lab. So Kasun talked about a tried and tested approach for effective AI adoption. So now we're going to focus on how our lab crafts AI solutions with our government partners in the Philippines. So when we talk about solutioning, we're talking about how we are matching the problems to solutions. So the nice thing about being somebody offering AI solutions is that everybody will say yes, especially when you offer to do all the hard work, or at least most of it. So the president himself says digitalization is a priority, and AI seems to be the hottest thing. So on the flip side, though, most people do not fully understand what AI is. So what it is and what it is not, what it can do, and how you can and cannot use it. So for organizations that are just starting their digitalization journey, every piece of software that does something clever looks like AI, when in fact all they need might be a very clever algorithm or a piece of software that does a task. So on analysis, many of these people who say they need AI turns out that they do not need AI at all. And then whether we should is a whole other discussion. So as we have said, it's important to identify the right problem first. So it's the message of Kasun earlier today. And then it's also important that partners understand that enabling structures need to be there in order for them to be able to adopt AI successfully. So we've said this in the previous talk that there must be skill within the organizations, both among those who will be running the tool and also more importantly among those who will be using the tool. So there must be infrastructure. They must have quality data that can be used by the AI itself, and it must be properly governed. So these are things that we must discuss with partners before we even build anything. So how do we go about matching these AI solutions to the right problem? So the last thing you want is to be a solution looking for a problem. So what would usually happen here is that you deploy a solution that does not solve a problem, and your effort ends at the proof of concept. Or the partner might even accept it because it is at no cost to them, but they will not use it. Perhaps they need it, but if they are not able to sustain it, they will use it for the lifetime of your project, and then after that, it becomes a white elephant. Or if they really need it and UNDP is willing to help, then they become dependent on UNDP. And both of these are not good, not sustainable. So a better way would be to involve the partner deeply, not just in crafting the solution itself, but in the definition of the problem. So usually it's this, we call this co-creation. I've heard this in UNDP before. So what this means locally for us is that we consult the problem during the creation of the project proposal. And then when the project starts, UNDP and the partner host an inception workshop where we convene everyone in the problem space to define the problem for all their different perspectives and to craft a holistic solutions. So the benefit we get from this is that the partner now publicly endorses UNDP with all their partners and all their collaborators as a development partner. And other partners from their perspective feel seen. So the partners are not always other government agencies. Sometimes they are CSOs. Sometimes they are the citizens themselves who are all but really happy to be asked about what they think and what they need. So this is especially important if the relationships are not yet developed or even strained. So in this beginning activity, we plant the seeds of buy-in, acceptance, and sustainability. So partners and stakeholders actively involved during the development also. So we make sure that the partner contributes to the project in funds or in kind. So when they invest their effort and their funds in the project, then there's a higher probability that they will continue to take care of the project even after the involvement of UNDP. So the partner would convene and join all meetings. They will join the user experience design, discussions with other stakeholders, so meetings, interviews, roundtable discussions, and even site visits. So expertise and on-the-ground experience as SMEs for the project would be coming from the partner. So these are usually national government agencies, but increasingly when we are talking about local governments, this is important, coming from Manila, which is usually not where they are. So we involve them also in data preparation, environment setup, quality assurance, all the way to roll out. So taking it to another level, what we do is we usually engage the partners in the context of a long-term partnership. So you see here activities with various partners that are outside the context of projects. So we support them even before the first project and in between projects. So, and we do this often without funding and on top of project work. We're doing this currently with a few agencies like the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Commission of Elections, Department of Science and Technologies, and some LGUs. So activities we do outside the projects would be strategizing and planning the partnership, being resource persons for their events. We provide trainings on data governance, data analytics, software development, sometimes also data science. We do solutioning, we study their organization, we listen to their problems, and sometimes even provide solutions that are small enough and conceptualize interventions with them. So we do all of this while practicing deep listening, so a skill that we got from our accelerator lab, so that we understand them, their context, and we build trust with the organizations. So when we do this, we find that it's easier to schedule meetings, even with the top leadership. So usually we are able to schedule meetings between our resident representative and their secretary quite easily, and the projects can move along very smoothly. We are able to identify needs and craft solutions with partners even before the project is created, and the solutions are usually long-term, spanning multiple UNDP projects. So when the need that has been pre-identified and funding intersect, we create the project. And the probability of success is greater because a lot of the relationship building and groundwork is already done. So this approach produces a lineup of projects for years. So we already have them lined up even and then waiting for the proper opportunity to execute. And it opens conversations on partner participation in funding of follow-up projects, often with the support of people we work with. So what this looks like is sometimes it looks like this. So we discuss outside of office hours, outside of project activities, but it can also look like this. So here we are talking to the garbage pickers in one of the provinces recently. So this approach has produced success for us across organizations. But curiously, it also builds success across sectors. So there's the multiplier effects that if you have this kind of relationship with many agencies and also local governments, we are able to put it all together. So UNDP now becomes a central piece that's able to see patterns across entire government agencies and craft solutions that will fit the scale of the problem, not just from one agency's perspective. And we're able to build reusable components that can address multiple needs with tweaking. So with this, we build influence across entire sections, such as climate finance, disaster risk reduction, and circular economy. And we get multiple benefits from the same projects because we can customize them and deploy them again and again. So let's look at some examples of what we have already done. So this is the DICT UNDP free Wi-Fi site selection, the project. So for this project, we have a long-term relationship with the Department of Information and Communication Technology, which is putting up free Wi-Fi in different sites of the country that are still unconnected. So this is a long-term project, and the relationship with the agency is already established. So separately from that, a proof of concept was developed by the Accelerator Lab to approximate poverty or alternatively wealth using data sets that are not usually used by government for coming up with a wealth index. So this is a picture of the output of that tool. So at some point, the partner DICT mentioned that they are having problems identifying sites for Wi-Fi connection because there are more sites that need connection than they have the capacity. And usually it takes a long time and it's very expensive for them to evaluate sites for connection. So we took out the old poverty index study, and then we tweak it so that it is now a site selection tool. So we swapped out some of the data sets, so it can now help the DICT identify Wi-Fi sites based on their own data sets on road networks, nighttime lights, presence of schools, and others. And now we are able to help them prioritize the putting up of Wi-Fi sites much more quickly, efficiently, and cheaply. So let's go also into the work that we've been doing for social protection. So specifically, what we've done recently is that we've we're deploying AI solutions for social protection at the Department of Social Welfare and Development. So it all started with the relationship between these two. So actually, this is the Secretary of DSWD, the Department of Social Welfare, and our former resident representative, Dr. Selva Ramachandran. So it started with an agreement to work together. So without talking about anything in particular, they signed an agreement that UNDP and DSWD will work on social protection. So that's them signing the MOU. And then together, we worked on identifying strategies and areas for cooperation. So it's a comprehensive approach, not particularly focused on AI or even on technology. So there are items that are on putting up events, that are on SDGs, that are on M&E, but also particularly on digitalization and AI, because digitalization is one of their focuses in their 5-year plan. So strategies were shared and projects were lined up, including possible AI use. So they shared their AI strategy with us. So here's us supporting them in one of their early digitalization efforts. This is a capacity development sessions actually. It was over 5 days for data governance. So we help them come up with their data governance framework and their data governance policies. At the same time, we provided technical assistance for their digitalization projects. So simple things like looking at the design or providing feedback to a plan, that means a lot to them because they don't have this skill in-house. So when an AI sprint comes along, UNDP includes AI for social protection that already matches the sprint guidelines and also the AI strategy that has already been previously shared with us. So in summary, the solution must solve the right problem, and identifying the right problem is key. Understanding of the solution of the entire system that covers people, process, policy, and technology is important for deploying a solution that both addresses a problem and can be sustained by the agency that accepts it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, and for that reflection from Philippines. What I take away is the amount of effort that goes into relationship building to actually the problem definition and scoping. You know, it goes beyond the sort of workshop that you mentioned, right? And I'm glad that you are sort of able to sort of put that that you were able to talk about that, because these are often things that are often forgotten. We think of this sort of, initial workshop as that we may do, and we can say, okay, check mark, everyone's brought together, and now we're going to somehow miraculously have a solution after that, right? And that is not the case. So, I very much appreciate the work that you all are doing in Philippines, and look forward to sort of more work that'll come from you and others in our region. I know we are running a little bit late on time, but we have a few about 10-15 minutes at least, right? If you can take that to quickly sort of have a little bit of a question and answer session with both of you all, Lorraine as well as Kasun and Merl. Maybe I think I would like to sort of start that one with this great question in the chat by Sean, right? Talking about I don't know. I think Sean is no longer there, but when you talked about rental assistance, especially SNAP, for example, we're already hearing a lot about that in the US in terms of these are politically charged conversation topics, right? Who gets in? Even the example that you mentioned, Kasun, right, about the fact that they were not able to access for the Spanish, right, the Hispanic community, right, and because there was no option to sort of talk about it, right, or the case at the beginning, which is around the fact that those who applied first got it, but they may not have been necessarily the first. There are arguments that people can make is that these people who applied first are showing initiative and they should be the ones that are prioritized, right? Now, these are not decisions that you can make, right? So talking a little bit about that political economy process and navigating, and we've talked about this quite a bit, Kasun and Merl in the past, which is this idea of how do you show and then let them understand the trade-offs, right? And they have to make that decision. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, which I think is relevant here as well.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you, Sean, if you're here, and Sri Ganesh. That is very true. Like political buy-in from the agencies themselves and the populace is critical for this type of work to be successful, right? And we've done work with more conservative leaning agencies and more like liberal leaning agencies. What the fact of the matter here is that when we develop something and deploy something, we can actually map, in very concrete terms, map the AI performance to a dollar value, right? So for instance, in the homelessness case, it's definitely true that one could make the argument that calling ahead and showing initiative to access the resources is valuable, right? And one could argue that they are more deserving than people who doesn't decide to call. But there are two things here. One is the intention of the program and the outcomes of the program, right? So the intentions of the rental assistance program is to minimize homelessness. So even though people are reaching out and asking for help, if the intention of the program is to minimize homelessness, the government and with each case of homelessness that you prevent, there is a cost that is being saved to the government as well. So like the political economy argument is that there is a dollar value that you can calculate the concrete impact of deploying this AI system. And sometimes showing initiative also means there's elevated access to things. So that could be, one could make the argument that it's not an equitable way of giving out limited resources. So how we've been thinking about this is with the more conservative agencies is if you can help 100 people, and if your goal is to prevent 100 homelessness episodes, if you can target the people who are at most risk of homelessness and find the people who are at risk of homelessness and help them, that preventing those 100 homelessness episodes will result to you in an X amount of saving in your budget, right? And in a use case in Kansas where it's a more conservative leaning agency, in a mental health project, it was to prevent people coming back into jail. So preventing jail episodes, jail sentences also prevents money. So the economic angle really pays well there, even if you don't consider the humanitarian angle of like stopping people from becoming homeless. Does that answer the question, Ganesh? Maybe one quick point is the other thing is like who gets to decide that, right? So this is where it's like one could argue that so we definitely don't. The people who are building the AI system definitely don't. What we can do is to provide concrete estimates of impact to the agency so that they can make a more informed decision about like the different trade-offs. If you prioritize first come first served, this is how this is the amount of savings you would have. If you prioritize people at risk, this is the amount of savings you would have. If you balance equity with efficiency, this is the amount of savings you have. Like we produce this menu of options for the agency at a very, very concrete level using data to give them this set of options that they can choose from. The other angle is we are doing some work here is to how do we engage the public in this decision-making system? Where is it appropriate to engage public? What information do we need to share with them? And how do we incorporate that feedback in the system design? So in the homelessness case, what we've been thinking, one layer of engagement that we've done is to engage with community organizations and present to them very concretely, this is the problem we're facing. We have limited money. We can't help everybody. We have to choose. The way we are currently choosing is not, the help is not reaching the people who need it the most. How do you think we should allocate this money? Is it fair, do you think, to prioritize people who are at risk of homelessness? And there's thoughts from the community organizations, and the next level of engagement that we want to do is to engage with the public itself. Identify people who have gone through, like, do focus group discussions, the type of work that Lorraine mentioned, not just with the agencies that we're supporting, but the people who are getting affected by the programs that we change by these systems. So that those are the like few dimensions that we've been thinking about this. I'm sorry I don't have a great answer because there's no literature around this also on how to get the feedback and incorporate it into the design. And we'll have to figure it out as we go in doing this. But the fact of the matter is, like, there is a efficiency argument of limited resources that we can make no matter where you fall in the political spectrum.
Thanks, Kasun, right? I mean, this is actually probably a conversation that can take several days, all the sort of nuances, and we've had several instances of that in the past. But I think, one sort of important takeaway from this response, and even sort of, which is brought up in the presentations, is that ultimately, machine, this AI, etc., we talk about these issues of bias, inclusion, whether everyone gets covered, things that may go wrong, right? Ultimately, you're not going to solve all the problems through the machine, right? That is impossible, right? And everything does have bias. So is the answer, right? That is the question that to navigate. Do not use AI. Or be, as the kind of things that sort of Kasun presented in that diagram towards the end, which is look at that larger ecosystem in which the AI sits, right? It is part of a socio-techno system, and other things outside of the AI that we do that actually improves sort of outcomes for the values that we espouse when we talk to government. So the answers won't always necessarily be in the machine, quote unquote. It'll be outside in terms of addressing and achieving optimal outcomes. The second point, I think, which is important to take away also from all of this discussion, is that are we asking, is it 100% inclusion or nothing at all, right? Or is the question, is the system better in terms of inclusion and the things that matter to us than what currently exists, right? These are two different questions, right? One is a maximalist argument. The other is it better than what we have? Because all of this will be a process. But critical to that is the fact is measurement, right? What we measure and how has to be sort of thought of sort of throughout this. So thank you for sort of bringing those aspects out. I just want to briefly give Merl a little bit of chance for reflection around some of the applications in developing countries with this methodology, right? The work that you'll have been doing, and sort of where do you see sort of differences coming. Sorry, you'll have to be brief, unfortunately. So, but looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with some of like the early stage deliberations and scoping that work that we've undertaken. And it has taken a while because especially in parts of the world, like there's no like experience to learn from them. And unlike in the US, there are no other agencies who have successfully adopted these systems. And there are real hesitancy and even almost like a fear around like whether these systems will like work in practice. And then there's like misconception, especially around, I think to Lorraine's point about like that sometimes like an intention to use AI without really thinking through the problem. So like over like multiple sessions, like Kasun and we have worked with like one example in the health sector with like a hospital in Sri Lanka, just trying to find out like a small workable problem that we can bring a solution into. It's a simple system that goes through like medical health records and provides like a simple decision support system. Now, what that is going to look like, I think took multiple weeks of discussion because we didn't start with a concrete problem. It was a partnership. And it's also important, especially in the early stages, to think about that we, like the agency or the partner will not come to you with a concrete problem. At least it has not been our experience. So they have some data that they use. It's like they broadly think it could be of some use, but then you need to figure out like how that data can be used into like a meaningful AI system. So that over multiple weeks, having these like slow discussions, meeting them in person, I think all the points that have been talked about, and over maybe like a month of discussion, you will settle into a single system. And even then, it might be the case that they don't have any guidance on how you even work with external partners. Then you have to like help with them those. So like this, in slightly like less mature systems like this, like taking time and not being rushed about what you're going to build, I think is like super important. That's like one of the more concrete things I could add.
Thanks, Merl. I know we are out of time, but maybe Lorraine, some reflections from you, having heard from Kasun and Merl, right? And you sort of, what are the things that stand out to you, if I may ask, right, from their presentation and applicability for UNDP's work, right? Yeah.
So what I think is notable there is that the way that we evaluate AI solutions needs to be a little bit different from the way that we evaluate other digital solutions. So it needs to be evaluated as a system, even more so than other digital solutions, because the human is inside the loop. So the human is part of the system. And that we should always be looking at it as a feedback loop. So we do this also in other digitalization projects, but even more important now that humans are part of the system. So this approach is consistent with our learnings from the past, with what works for other digital solutions, but exaggerated for AI.
Thank you, Lorraine. And, I keep thinking back to that photo that you have in your presentation of you and your partners having drinks afterwards, right? And I think, those kind of things are important, right? These non-formal interactions, right? To build trust with who you're collaborating, right? And be able to sort of access them outside of these formal channels, right? Which sometimes, because you start these are relationships that need to be nurtured. And so very much appreciate you bringing that point up, right? About the efforts that goes into relationship building. So as a means to develop solutions and outcomes that sort of are in the public interest. Thank you to the three of y'all for those sort of collective thoughts around how we think about AI development in practice, the kinds of lessons, right? There are sort of so many different takeaways. I mentioned two earlier in the comments, but there are others as well. I think from today, about the level of investment required way before you do any actual model development, right? In defining the problem, in scoping it out properly, right? The second, the other one is really, right, we are right now in an arena oftentimes where we hear like, oh, I have an AI solution for you for this problem, right? That there's a productization, right, of all of these, right? And that is not always feasible, right? The level of customization that is required to the socio-political context and the kind of problem and how it manifests in that location means that this is not a case of buying Microsoft Office, right? This is a case of actually developing And therefore, that brings about the other most important aspect, capabilities and capacity of governments to maintain these things, right? If we are, as UNDP, helping governments develop some of these solutions, right, and we have helped evaluate it, how do you make sure that they continuously evaluate it, right, and make the necessary changes as the data may change, as the processes may change? So those are things that we will be doing in our BAP, in our team, a lot more work on. We have a few outputs that are coming out, right, related to this. One is around to help country officers shape some of these conversations with governments in approaching AI. Some practical guidance on how what are the sort of life cycle toolkit, right? When you start to develop AI projects, what could that look like? Which leverages some of the lessons that we already heard from, and also a scan of what AI governance looks like in practice in Asia Pacific, and the kinds of regimes, the kinds of work undergoing in that arena that will be out shortly. We have a few more webinars in the new year, right? We will come back to you on that. But one of the key things for us in this new year is really the AI Sandboxes and Stewards program for us here at that we are sort of doing with several country offices in the new year. We'll have a webinar around that. It again goes back to some of the messages that we've heard today around the importance of capacity and capability development, which is not something that is achievable over a 5-day course or a 3-hour online session, right? This is about learning by doing, and how do you sort of are able to mentor that process and help government agencies to learn by doing as a sort of a standard SOP in their work.